Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Wednesday, January 10th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 234 days. The game against Michigan in 325 days. Today, we are welcoming back our good buddy Ross Fulton of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when we welcome Ross in, we also welcome back our friends from Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Glad to have them back. Glad to have Ross back. We're going to be talking today a little bit about the Cotton Bowl, not too much. We're going to give you just the absolute bare minimum of the Cotton Bowl. I know you guys don't want to think about it or hear about it, but we got to talk about some stuff in terms of what's got to be fixed for 2024. So, Ross, we're going to start by talking about some of the guys they have brought in to maybe address some of the issues that we saw in the Cotton Bowl. Quarterback Will Howard transferring from Kansas State. Running back Quinshon Judkins transferring from Ole Miss. Center Seth McLaughlin transferring from Alabama, and tight end Will Kaczmarek transferring up from Athens, Ohio, and the Ohio Bobcats. What do these guys have in common? How does this sort of approach to the transfer portal maybe address what Ohio State is going to be trying to do offensively in 2024?
Sure. So I guess starting with Will Howard, we just go in sequential order there. I kind of feel like that Will Howard is the guy that they've hoped Devin Brown would be, but hasn't been yet and wasn't in the Cotton Bowl before he got hurt. He's a big, strong guy who's willing and able to run between the tackles and open up some read stuff and some design quarterback runs. Not the biggest arm, but he's accurate. And I think that we can talk about this a little bit later, but I do think you'll see more of a general move back, more akin to the 2019 Ohio State offense with Justin Fields. That was more of a mix of spread run concepts and under center downfield stuff. Judkins, he's just a really good player. I think the one thing that he does offer, I think he can do some of everything. He keeps the chains moving. He has a little bit of Blake Corum in him that way, but he is good on stretch. And so I know, as we've discussed, I've never thought that's been TreVeyon Henderson's, best run play. And so to the extent that that remains part of the offense, which I, assume it will be, even if it is and should be a smaller part, I think he can be really effective. Like we've seen still, if you think back to Dobbins or even Trey Sermon, how effective that play is when you have the right tailback to read it and run it correctly. And then, I think between McLaughlin, the center situation, the Cotton Bowl was a disaster. To be frank, you could tell that they were not IDing anything up front correctly or making line calls in the proper way. And so Missouri just had a bunch of unblocked defenders coming off the edge. Nothing was ever identified. And so, I don't know what to make of Carson Hinsman. He wasn't particularly great all season, just in terms of blocking. And so, McLaughlin started 25 games at Alabama. That in and of itself is a pretty big step. And so either, that if you lock down the center position, which I think was a bit of a problem this year, you then have, even if you're not assuming Carson Hinsman as a starter at perhaps guard, you still have three other starters back, assuming Donovan Jackson returns. And then you have to hope that Luke Montgomery's ready. They burned his red shirt this year for 1 to 2 plays a game. So you would hope that they did not do that without more of a plan in mind and assuming that he'd be able to play next year. And so that would get you to 5 and at least quite a bit of experience. And then the tight end blocking, people like to talk about the offensive line blocking this year, which had its ups and downs. I actually think in light of having watched Michigan the last 2 games, I think the Ohio State offensive line actually held itself up pretty well in Ann Arbor, probably better than the Alabama and Washington lines did against Michigan. The Cotton Bowl is obviously a mess with the line change, but the tight end blocking has been just such a mess. And especially if you want to run stretch, if you want to run some of the outside stuff that we're going to talk about, particularly like with the quarterback read element, like bash plays, like they just can't have the blocking that they've had at that spot. And so I think, maybe the tight end position, that could be like the biggest transfer in of all, just if it could solidify the blocking at that spot.
Yeah, Will Kaczmarek, the only guy not to come from a Power 5 conference team. Got a couple guys coming out of the SEC. Will Howard, a longtime starter in the Big 12, and it might be the guy from Ohio University who could be the biggest immediate impact guy there for the Buckeyes. Let's talk real briefly. I promise everyone we're going to keep this as brief as humanly possible. We know you don't want to think about the Cotton Bowl any more than you have to, but there is some learning to be done here. We're going to talk just about the first play of the game and how this sort of shows some of the issues that Ross is talking about here that are going to need to be addressed. So walk us through this first one.
Yeah, so Ohio State comes out in this 2 tight end look, but with one of the tight ends as a fullback, essentially offset, and brings TreVeyon Henderson in motion from the slot. And they're running a GT counter bash with the quarterback, right? So they're blocking counter tray for the quarterback away from the bash or like the sweep to Henderson, right? And so your first problem comes here is like Devin Brown misreads this play. Like he obviously got hurt. He only played like 16 or so plays, but unfortunately, I think he was making incorrect reads on nearly every one of them, whether that was in the run game or the pass game, which obviously makes it difficult. And so to our point about Will Howard coming in with a lot of experience, he can both bring the run element, but ideally be making these reads correctly. Then, we're talking about like the misidentificational game. You have 2 tight ends here who both try to block the same guy. So you're already outnumbered because the ball is going the wrong place. It should have stayed. Brown should have kept it and run the counter blocking. If you see it, it's pretty clean to the opposite side. But then you're at number 4-3 on the bash side, but then you have 2 guys blocking the same guy. So that exacerbates the issue. So you just saw this all game. And, unfortunately, the problem was like, they obviously have, again, I think they've had this like concept of what they've wanted Devin Brown to be and like how it could expand the offense. And I think that's probably part of the reason that like they were okay moving on from Kyle McCord because of like his physical limitations and like what they thought they could bring. So like whenever you saw Devin Brown come in the game this year, like they'd immediately run plays like this, like with a, quarterback counter tray bash concepts, but like they could not execute it well. And like throughout this game, they kept trying to do this stuff and it wasn't working, both because like quarterback was reading it incorrectly. They weren't blocking it right. And so like there were things that were working, like they got in heavy personnel and ran like power a couple times that worked, but they never went back to it, or like inside zone read. So all this is to say that like, if they want to add these elements to the game, to their plan, which I do think will help. Again, that is a lot of what they did with Justin Fields also, like running bash plays where he would be the inside ball carrier. Like, they need to be able to incorporate it in a way that works. And that starts both the execution as well as like not getting too married to things like this. And it will take, I think, some work to go back to sort of that plan of mixing these kind of quarterback runs in without getting too married to the concepts and like being able to run the rest of the offense as well.
Well, we just named 4 different guys who are going to be new faces for the Buckeyes on offense in 2024. There's another X factor in all of this, and that's, hey, there's probably going to be another offensive coordinator, assuming the Football Scoop report from the end of last week is accurate. And based on, what I would speculate would be the sourcing on that, I'm going to guess that the Football Scoop report is going to be accurate, and there is going to be a new offensive coordinator calling plays, at least in conjunction with Ryan Day. How much do you think not having Kevin Wilson there this year, and Kevin Wilson's experience with, the sort of spread run game and the spread power run game that he had from his Northwestern and Oklahoma days, how much do you think that impacted the offense this year? And if you're going to bring in a quarterback like Will Howard to presumably start for Ohio State this year, and you're going to have a Quinshon Judkins in there, potentially in conjunction with TreVeyon Henderson and all of that kind of stuff, with the offense that you're sort of looking for them to run this year, do you have a name or names in mind in terms of, hey, this would be a guy who at least runs the type of offense or might be a good fit for what Ohio State, might be looking to do this fall?
Yeah, not necessarily. I mean, I guess the things I would be looking for is, like, to your Kevin Wilson point, I think a veteran presence up in the booth would be helpful. I have said throughout the year, we've talked about this. Like, I didn't necessarily have a problem with Ryan Day calling the plays, and I still don't. But, like, you can only see so much on the sideline, and then, like, this goes to, like, the cotton pole point and adjusting. It's just hard if you're like only have a couple guys upstairs and they're both pretty young and not a lot of experience, and like how much is he actually relying on them? Like, you have to be able to adjust series to series. And so, at a minimum, I would think like a Wilson like veteran presence would help. I do think that it would be nice to revamp the run game somewhat. And that's not even getting into like the quarterback run stuff. That's just like talking about how they approach the run game and gap schemes in the mix of inside and zone and outside zone with, power and counter Trey, and how they're blocking him up front. So finding someone that could help sort of buff up the run game, because I do think they're going to need to run the football better, and like bringing in Will Howard, like I think they expect to. And with these two tailbacks, assuming Henderson comes back, even without him, I mean, I think Judkins has been, one of the best backs in the college football the last 2 years. So they need to be able to run the football better. And so that's, another part of it. But I really just think it's like someone who's on the same page with Day in terms of offensive philosophy and scheme, and that can, serve as someone upstairs, because it's a lot on Day's plate. And I feel like you can like physically see like the overwhelming burden on him at times on his shoulders. And I just think he's been trying to carry too much load. And I don't know that that's sustainable.
Well, it seems like Ryan Day has figured out it probably is not sustainable. So we'll see what those coaching changes might end up being. That could happen as soon as today or tomorrow. You sort of see the ball rolling on that with some more changes. The AFCA, American Football Coaches Association convention ends on the 10th, on Wednesday today. So that is sort of one of those milepost days where you might start to see some more movement on the coaching front there. Also going to have some NFL draft announcements coming. Denzel Burke had said that he's going to be announcing on the 10th. We'll see there's a few other announcements still to come before the 15th. There's still some potential transfer portal targets for the Buckeyes to maybe bring in. You got the coaching stuff. You got the NFL draft declarations. And you've got then the start of spring ball and all that stuff. Boy, there's going to be a lot of movement on a lot of these different fronts in the coming days and weeks. And a great place to experience all of that would be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Ross and our whole team of X's and O's gurus making you a smarter football fan. Mark covering the recruiting beat. There is a lot of news on the recruiting beat. Mark had a post on our Huddle board, presented by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, which is members only. Lots of very encouraging news for Ohio State on the recruiting front on defense for the class of 2025, the upcoming class. Maybe even a little bit of encouraging news for the class of 2024 on that front. And then, of course, Tony and Kevin and I covering the team. There's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about on that front as well. So make sure you get yourself to BuckeyeHuddle.com and YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. And also make sure you get yourself to Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steak, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. JeffRuby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.